The stories you are about to hear are true. Welcome to Scary Stories.
This is the true story of United States Navy Blimp L-8. It is known today in military databases as the Ghost Blimp. And to understand why it is so unsettling, you have to understand the sheer impossibility of what happened on that damp, gray morning. It was August 16, 1942. The world was at war. The United States was on edge. Just months after Pearl Harbor, the west coast of the country was in a state of high alert. The ocean was no longer just a body of water. It was a hiding place. Japanese submarines were known to be prowling beneath the Pacific waves, capable of striking the California coast at any moment. To combat this invisible threat, the U.S. Navy utilized a fleet of anti-submarine blimps. These massive, slow-moving airships were perfect for the job. They could hover for hours. They could see deep into the water. And according to all engineering data, they were considered incredibly safe. Blimp L-8 was one of the most reliable in the fleet. It was a massive silver balloon, stretching 150 feet across the sky, carrying a small, cramped control car bolted to its underside. On this particular morning, L-8 was scheduled for a routine patrol over the waters just outside San Francisco. The crew consisted of just two men. First was Lieutenant Ernest Cody. He was 32 years old, a seasoned pilot, and a highly respected veteran of the Navy. He had flown these patrols countless times. He was the kind of man who did not panic. Second was Ensign Charles Adams. He was 38, a veteran with over 20 years of military experience. He had recently been commissioned as an officer and was eager to prove himself. These were not amateurs. These were two of the most capable, level-headed men the Navy had to offer. At exactly 6:03 in the morning, L-8 lifted off from Treasure Island. The engines hummed with a steady, reassuring vibration. The blimp ascended into the cool morning air, cutting through the low-hanging coastal fog. Everything was perfectly normal. The weather was standard. The equipment was fully inspected and functional. For the first hour and a half, the patrol went exactly as planned. Lieutenant Cody radioed in his position at regular intervals. The transmissions were clear. His voice was calm. They flew over the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, heading out toward the Farallon Islands. Then, at 7:42 a.m., a transmission crackled over the radio back at headquarters. It was Lieutenant Cody. His voice was still steady, but there was a sharp edge of focus to it. "I'm investigating suspicious oil slick," he said. "Stand by." An oil slick on the surface of the water was the telltale sign of a submerged submarine. This was exactly what they were trained to look for. Nearby ships heard the transmission. Two different surface vessels looked up and spotted the silver blimp circling a dark patch on the ocean beneath them. They watched as L-8 descended closer to the water, dropping to an altitude of just 300 feet. The ships watched the blimp circle the oil slick for over an hour. The airship moved with purpose. It dropped two smoke flares to mark the location. It seemed as though Cody and Adams were tracking something directly beneath the waves. And then, the blimp simply stopped circling. It pulled up. It turned. And it began to head steadily, back toward the coast of San Francisco. The sailors on the ships below didn't think much of it. They assumed the blimp had finished its investigation and was heading back to report. But back at headquarters, the radio operators were growing uneasy. "L-8, this is base. Please update your status." "Over." Silence. "L-8. Please respond." Nothing but the faint hiss of static. An hour passed. Then 2. The Navy began to panic. They called in search planes to try and locate the blimp, but L-8 wasn't lost at sea. It was already over land. Just before noon, horrified civilians in the town of Daly City, California, looked up at the sky. What they saw looked like something out of a nightmare. The massive silver blimp was drifting silently through the clouds, but it was partially deflated. It was sagging in the middle, looking like a wounded animal, and it was descending fast. It scraped against the rooftops of a residential neighborhood. It tore through a set of power lines, sending a shower of bright blue sparks raining down onto the street. Finally, with a heavy metallic crunch, the control car slammed into the pavement of Bellevue Avenue, right in the middle of town. The blimp was down. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police officers, firefighters, and local residents rushed to the crash site. They fully expected to find two injured Navy men trapped inside the wreckage, needing immediate medical attention. The first person to reach the control car grabbed the handle of the door and yanked it open. He looked inside. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He looked again. The cabin was completely empty. There was no sign of Lieutenant Cody. There was no sign of Ensign Adams. When the military arrived and secured the area, the investigation they conducted only deepened the mystery. Every discovery they made pushed the boundaries of logic. The men were gone, but absolutely nothing else was out of place. The door to the control car was latched wide open. Inside, the radios were in perfect working condition. In fact, the microphone was dangling from its hook as if it had just been used. The Blimp's engines were perfectly fine. The ignition switches were turned on. The fuel tanks were mostly full. The Navy looked for signs of a struggle. There was no blood, no broken glass, no scuff marks on the floor. Perhaps they had to abandon ship in an emergency? The investigators checked the emergency equipment. Both of the men's parachutes were still perfectly packed and hanging on their designated hooks. The emergency life raft was fully inflated, securely tied to the ceiling, completely untouched. Even the highly classified codebooks, the documents that officers were strictly ordered to destroy if they were ever in danger of being captured, were sitting untouched on the navigation desk. In the corner of the cabin, a thermos of coffee sat perfectly upright. It was still warm. Two experienced veteran military officers simply vanished into thin air. If they had fallen out of the Blimp, why? The door was securely latched open from the inside, a procedure only done if they were casually observing something below, not in an emergency. If one man had accidentally slipped and fallen, the other would have instantly used the perfectly functioning radio to scream for help. He would have dropped the life raft. He would have marked the location, but the radio was silent. And if both men fell, how could two incredibly experienced men both accidentally fall out of a small door at the exact same moment, without a single distress call? The Navy searched the ocean for weeks. They dragged the area where the oil slick had been spotted. They interviewed every sailor on every ship that had seen the Blimp that morning. No bodies were ever recovered. No clothing was ever found washing up on the shore. At the official inquiry, the United States Navy was forced to admit something terrifying. They had absolutely no explanation. The final report stated that the crew of Blimp L8 had vanished under undetermined circumstances. To this day, over 80 years later, the military file remains unsolved. It is a story that defies the laws of physics and human nature. Two men, miles above the earth, locked inside a tiny metal box. Nothing went wrong. Nothing broke. Nothing attacked them. They were there one moment, and then, somewhere between the cold Pacific Ocean and the gray California clouds, they stepped out of reality. And they never came back.